All right, welcome to the Here to There show. I'm so happy that you have joined us today. This is the fourth installment of the Here to There show. And the Here to There show is a discovery on how subject matter experts, people that have a particular background, particular focus, how they move people from point A to point B. How do they take them from here to there? Because they don't want to be here, they want to be there. So I'm going to be interviewing Bobbi today on how she takes her clients from one place to another, and it's going to be a pretty organic conversation. And let's get started. I'm going to stop sharing, and then we're going to continue. So, welcome Bobbi to the Here to There show. I'm going to change my viewer screen and thank you for being here. Bobbi is also going to be our guest speaker on Friday for the Widen Your Gaze show. And Bobbi, our title for Friday's talk is, I just had it up here and I've dealt with so many stuff. So if you want to just let us talk about what what you're going to be talking on Friday, just what's the title of it? And it's help me out here. Are you recalling it? I'm trying to
Yes, I was going to say it, but I was
Yeah.
allowing you time to find
Okay.
your way. So, welcome everybody. Yeah, you were interested in having me share about the co-relationship between empowerment and forgiveness.
How could I forget that? I think I picked that title,
That's
didn't
okay.
I?
That's okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we're going to be talking about that throughout this next hour and whatnot. But as I said, this is meant to be an organic conversation where we just kind of get to know each other. And Bobbi, you're based here in Edmonton, like I am on that, on that. And so, what is what? Tell us about the hats that you wear in your work life and whatnot.
Okay. Well, right now, like many people, my hat's off in terms of doing my direct one-to-one client work. I'm working mainly in occupational health as a nurse, writing policies and procedures right now. Rather dry, mundane work. But when I'm doing the work I love with my clients one to one, and which I've been doing for many, many years since the 90s, I was working, as I say, walking with both feet. I was working in nursing in its classic form and then in bioenergetic healing. And I have most recently just been learning more and more about forgiveness as my patients or clients, I like to call them, help me to discover with them how much states of lack of forgiveness or resentment or anger had been a covert and draining part of their lives, and which seemed to be actually a form of spiritual disability, if I'd have to use a phrase.
Okay. Now, how how do you define the difference between spiritual and religious? Because I think for some people that's often misunderstood, and yeah, so we're going to start with that, and then we're going to give us a working definition, please.
Yeah, I'll give you a working definition. Ultimately, this will come from a personal place for me, because I mean, who can really, in the end, define spirit? It's rather nebulous, but somehow we all sort of know what it is at our own level and in our own way. So it is something beyond the form of who I am. And for me, it is connected. It is my interface with a higher power. So I use the term God, and very recently I've had no problem with using terms like Jesus or the Holy Spirit or the voice within or the great Atman or I believe there are many paths to God. So whatever that interface is for people within their belief system, whatever we're talking about today is inclusive.
Okay.
And then for religious, I believe that's just to be, for me, a little more structured, perhaps has some form that people follow for whatever spiritual guidance and whatever spiritual meaning they care to create with their higher power. And that there's certainly a place for that in people's lives.
Yeah, it would seem to me that one of the when you talk about form or whatnot, but it's rituals. It seemed that we're talking about rituals and the importance of rituals within that, and different different faiths have very different rituals that they engage in and whatnot on a regular basis. So the Catholic Mass, can look it does look very different than other ones on that, because that's part of their ritual. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, yes, I think that rituals everyone can have rituals, and they're the ones that are perhaps more, should we say, collective and shared within, and have a specific form. For example, the taking of communion within the Catholic Church, just as an example, is more pervasive, collective, and understood. Whereas I have rituals, and I might wake up in the morning and set my intention for the type of day that I hope to have, with the guidance of my higher power or God.
Do you think that sometimes it's a lack of rituals that people sometimes causes them to feel lost and whatnot, or no touchstones to take on? Do you see any correlation with that?
I can't be sure that lacking ritual means that you would get lost. I would say it's probably more important to consider what it is we're paying attention to within our mind, and how those thoughts direct our reality and our experience of our lives.
Okay, right. Do you mind if I ask what were you raised in a particular faith?
Yes, in fact, I was raised in the Catholic religion up until about age 8. And then my parents divorced not soon after, and then I was not following any particular faith. Then I began an exploration of many faiths late in my 30s, because I felt called to search something greater than me. And I actually can't remember if there was a catalyst for that, anything specific, but I tried the Pentecostal church, I tried the Baptist church, I went back to the Catholic church, I went to Buddhism, Buddhist monastery. I was looking everywhere for something.
Right.
To find my way.
And obviously there wasn't the draw when you went church shopping, I guess. Maybe that's not the right term for it. But when you tried out different faiths and whatnot, there's none that really kind of stuck with you that you still go today. Is it an amalgamation, or?
Yeah, I have to think of a term that I learned in one of them. I can't remember, but legalism for me was the wall I kept banging into. And for me, that meant, and it may mean many things for different people, but for me, legalism created
legalism.
Okay. So within a belief system, legalism was required that certain ways of thought or actions were how one could be connected to something greater than ourselves, whatever we believe. And I kept banging into that, and in my own mind, about not what seemed to feel right within me and within my mind about what a higher power would be. So that ends up being the door that closed, but for me it was legalism.
Okay. Yeah, because I've never heard that term before in regards to that. So is it a specific doctrine that comes
Well, I'll give you an example. Here's an example of legalism. Say perhaps in a particular religion, there may be a requirement to give some of your resources in order to be right with your higher power. And that could be your time, it could be your money, it could be whatever. But without doing that, then you may not be eligible to be connected in the way others who are giving more are connected to the higher power. So it created, for me, hierarchies and areas of exclusiveness that didn't fit with what I sensed how I align with something like God or
right
myself. Yes.
Yeah, I recall the birth of Lutheranism with Martin Luther, on how and I learned this in religious studies. Apparently, Martin Luther was he was born into an affluent family. He was on the track to be a barrister, a solicitor, a lawyer of some kind, and he rejected that all, and he basically decided that he wanted to become a priest or a monk or something. And one day he was traveling throughout the town, and he came across a person that was supposed to be of a good Christian faith drunk or something, and he says, brother, you should not do this. And the guy that was intoxicated pulls out a piece of paper and says, well, here is my future absolutions. I purchase absolutions for future sins. And what came out of that was, as the story goes, if I understand it correctly, Martin Luther went and wrote up a things of what was wrong with the church as a way of creating conversations. And with the advent of the Gutenberg press, somebody took it and they printed it, and it spread like wildfire. And overnight, you have pretty much a new faith. But it was come out of this whole thing of future absolutions, and if you give enough, then you're buying your way into church, which he really disliked, and he really was pushing against. Didn't want that, and he just wanted to have a conversation about what was wrong. And it seemed that the masses were really ready to go down that path and look at something different, because they were apparently also fed up with it. So yeah, that whole idea of tithing, and if you give money, does that mean your faith is better, and that kind of stuff, right? So
yeah, I just question that, but I certainly respect if anybody needs form and ritual and method within their own faith system to create meaning between them and their higher power. That is meaningful for them, and I respect that.
Well, we are creatures of habit. We do things, on that, so that fills within the need within us to have those, daily things that kind of draw us back. That's why we also know that good mental health is about having those things that we do on a regular basis that help us find our way back when we're having that. Do you have any thoughts on that you'd like to share about, how mental health is, how we contribute to good mental health
through
life, through going through things throughout the day? How important is that we have routines in our life? For yourself, do you think about that, or?
Yeah, I've read that routines can be very valuable for creating some sort of structure rather than having things haphazard. But then people that have been very structured have been enjoying good mental health from the loss of structure, in terms of feeling freedom and creativity. So I think it depends where on the continuum of structure one is.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense on that. So can you talk about bioenergetic healing and what that, what does that mean? And
well, the premise of bioenergetic healing is ancient. We just have new words for what was already there for millennia. And that's just the idea that our thoughts and affect our form, our body, and then therefore our lives. And so a bioenergetic healer is going to be anyone under the umbrella of energy worker. And back in the 90s when I trained in it, it was evolving, just considered woo-woo, stupid. But I have a scientific mind. I realized that there were limits in what I was doing in traditional healthcare, and I don't consider it that it's wrong. It's just limited. And then I read about things that seem paranormal, like how did someone have a tumor and then when opened up, the tumor's gone? How did people pray and change healing or outcomes for people? How did that work? And so there was much that was unexplained, and it got me to search and read more. And then that's where I learned about traditional Chinese medicine, not trained in it, but learned about it, and the idea of qi and the movement of, which now is more commonplace. Everybody talks about it. This paradigm called Paradigm 3 by people who are looking at these paradigms say that we've moved from a mechanistic to more holistic, and then Paradigm 3 is more that we're looking energetically too. And so we're now in Paradigm 3, where we're saying there's more than just the physical form, and it's measurable. We have an electromagnetic field around us. People have been feeling all the time with their hands. I feel with my hands, and actually we have light emanating out of our body at conception. Light sparks when ova and sperm meet. So we are creatures of beings of light, And so this is now indisputable. As a matter of fact, I forget which type of scanner it is. If it was PET scan. Anyways, chi meridians have been found. So this is no longer foolishness. It's real. So there seems to be some sort of software that works for this form all the time that is working.
Form is in our bodies, our form. When you mean form,
yeah, our form, yeah, this body. So there's the hardware of the body and then the software of energy that is not unlike computers, but obviously with extremely advanced mind components, whatever the correlation that would be if I just had to use with of course, not trying to imagine that we're robotic or AI, but there's some, uncanny overlaps. So, yeah.
It would seem to me that what I think is often considered the woo-woo space, tarot card readers and people that deal with angels and energy work and Reiki and that kind of stuff, that there is it's becoming more and more accepted because of the fact that they can falsify it by measuring it, and because that's the whole thing, right? If you can't falsify something, then it's really not empirical, because if you can't determine when it doesn't happen, you can see when it happens, but if you can't determine why it doesn't happen, then it's just basically wishful thinking on that. And so that seems to be reducing a lot of the barriers, or starting to reduce barriers, because people who are in their intellect go, if I can't see it, if I can't measure it, it doesn't count. It's really not there. But we're finding tools now to have this more and more. And I'm often quantum physics about what we're seeing in quantum physics.
Yes.
Just even the observing of something changes the outcome of it, right? So
yeah, and that's so old. Like that's quantum mechanics was what?
Oh, quantum mechanics, thank you.
1915? Like it took 100 years for quantum mechanics to get any footing. And now overlapping and theoretical physicists talking more about, non-locality wavicles, which is growing. And I think it would be so naive to think that we wouldn't be growing these ideas and interfacing them existentially with who we are, because we're in it. There's no lead box around us. So, but even with a lead box, Faraday still got waves. So, I think it's fascinating that it's growing, and what an exciting time we live in to be curious and to explore and to consider, as your program is called, looking beyond, like looking at something in a new way, because maybe the way things were working before were useful and continue to be, but perhaps there's more ideas now.
Yeah, and it's kind of exciting to think what we're going to be able to measure in 50 years or 30 years with the advent of different things on that, whatnot. Yeah.
So in the bioenergetic model, to get back to that,
yeah,
that statement we've all heard at some level or another, your thoughts create your reality, has meaning. Has meaning if one considers it. And we can think about it. We can think about, if I'm largely thinking negatively, it's amazing how I seem to attract a lot of negative stuff in my life. And positive people seem to be having positive experiences. What's with that? Are they just imagining it, or what is that about? What kind of vibration is that about? So with my clients, they were typically like people that can afford energy work are generally have discretionary funds to work with. They are generally at a place where they're more mature. They're looking for other options. They're dissatisfied with different aspects of their lives, often physical complaints, and they're not getting the answers they want within the traditional allopathic model. And so, and they're not necessarily getting their answers with, mental health therapies. And yet, I would say that bioenergetic therapies are, in fact, embrace mental health. So, so the common denominator that I kept very often, not in all cases, because not all my clients were open to it, was we get to some level of pain, and that the physical pain was just the tip of the iceberg of a deeper pain of longing, a deeper pain of loss. And often that manifested in some form of resent or pain that they had not either released or come to terms with in a way that could bring them peace. which is by no means an easy thing. I am not suggesting it's just a mechanical step one does and that's it. But in some way, that forgiveness process had not been fully realized. So we worked together on that and found ways to begin to have a discussion about, well, what is forgiveness? And in doing so, I kept repeating different ideas and different concepts, which I don't know, frankly, where they came from, but now I know. I think we all are plugged in to the universal mind and universal information. And if we listen, I believe things just come in. So for that person in that moment, and for many of my clients, that's what we talk about is forgiveness. And I have to tell you, I never imagined that's where my energy work was going. That totally surprised me.
So forgiveness is a very interesting perspective on that. And I always, and I know that's what we're talking about on Friday, and that's what your presentation is going to be on Friday. But I shared this recently, and I'm not sure if you had heard this in Bobbi and I attend some other, we're in other circles together. We're in another community. And I was talking recently about my inquiry and my conundrum with forgiveness. What does that mean? And it just kind of, it came to me one day, and this is like 8-9 years ago, just like, well, what exactly is forgiveness? And I'm not sure I know what that means. And so what I started doing is I went to my spiritual leader and got his opinion. And then I went to my mother when she was alive back then, and still very vibrant. She ended up having Alzheimer's, and she passed away just over a year ago. But she was a Catholic. There was a time that she left the Catholic Church when I was growing up because of I lost a sister before I was born, and then she left in the 60s. She left her husband, my father, in northern Alberta in the French community. It's something you never did in the 60s, especially in small French communities. And so she fell out with the church. And then it was only after I grew up that she actually went back to the Catholic Church. And so I asked her, what does forgiveness mean? And she really surprised me when she went and didn't have an actual answer as to what that, I thought she would have had an answer. And so as I continue to look and try and discover what does forgiveness mean, it occurred to me to actually look it up in the dictionary one day, and that's where I got my answer. Forgiveness was simply choosing to no longer be angry, and it has nothing to do with the other person. And I always thought forgiveness was one person taking the high road, one person going, "Omde Padre, I forgive you because I'm the better person," type of thing, right? So for me, forgiveness was always a lose situation. If you gave it, you had to compromise, or if you accepted it, somehow you're less than that person. So how enlightening was it for me when I realized it has nothing to do with any of those, and the fact that it's just a state of mind and choice. Do you have a similar path where you're trying to figure out what forgiveness means and on that, and where you came with it, or is it something you always knew?
I'd like you, I had learned too about forgiveness through whatever teachings and valuable teachings I had learned in different faith systems, and knew it was a good thing to do. And yet, like you, had a quandary of, well, if it was so great, why don't people do it? That's what I was, and why don't I do it? Or then it'd be conditional. Well, I'll forgive, but I won't forget.
Yeah.
Right. So, well, that's not forgiving.
That's harboring.
Yeah. So I too was puzzled like you, and yeah, and I think it was, as so often is the case, the people that we meet in our lives teach us, and so it was my clients who were teaching me more deeply about what that suffering is for them, which, not forgiving creates suffering. No matter how well they were thinking they were managing it, accomplished, financially secure, traveled the world, and everything all on your tick box list, but inside, suffering quietly, feeling something's missing, not feeling whole, not feeling a sense of peace, and just longing for something that they even couldn't put their finger on. And the more space we made for that kind of conversation, where I would use my hands energetically to work with people, the more they would release and release. And 9 times out of 10, it would be sobbing and fear, and not fear, sobbing and tears. Anger could be a reaction, but I never saw that. People just seem to open up, just crack open, and sob and sob. And again, the most prevalent thing was some sort of primordial pain about a family, or about loss, or an expectation of love, or not receiving the love they felt they needed, either through a transgression of someone else, which meant a betrayal or something else, or something unfair, or a limitation of someone other than them to give them what they needed. And which, all the stories varied, but the bottom line was that story. I did not get the love I needed. I did not get the love I expected to get.
In a circumstance, or
in a circumstance, yeah. The common denominator was that. So this grief, this longing, and this pain for the love that they wanted to have was at the crux of these sort of moments. And that's when I started to see this correlation between that place and forgiveness, because without releasing it, which I knew energetically and in an energetic model, there wouldn't be room in the system, in the body, for making room for what it needed in the body mind. Looking at a bioenergetic model, and so we would begin to discuss. Well, let's talk about forgiveness. Where are you at with the idea of forgiveness? And truly, 75% of people weren't ready to forgive. When they came back out of their grief and came back into what I would say is their ego, and came back into the ego, the defenses flew up, and that was it. They were not ready to go there. But some people, for whatever reason, they weren't better than the people who couldn't, but for that moment, they felt safe enough to say, I can begin to think that I need to change this. I need to change my mind about this, or maybe I can let this go, or maybe it's time to rethink this. And for those people who were able to do that, things changed.
So it really seems to me that there's a decision that maybe it's not working, and they might be ready for another way of being.
Yes.
On that. And there's 2 sayings I like about anger, and anger is drinking poison is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die, or anger is a hot coal that you hold on to and you expect the other person to get burnt, right? Like, no, nothing's, we're the one harboring it. I just think of the people that are still living rent-free in my head because of the fact is that I haven't forgiven them, and they probably are totally unaware. Well, some of them are dead, right? But they're totally unaware of the fact that I might be harboring this stuff in my head, in my mind about them. So I do know that when I've talked to other people who are more I'm trying to think what the word is they're certain in their faith. They're more like they're dug in. I don't want to use the word entrenched, but they're dug in on their faith, and if it doesn't run through their particular how their faith prescribes to the world, then it's kind of dismissed out and out altogether, because I've actually had people say, well, Reiki is really the devil coming through you, because it didn't fit within their faith and whatnot, or that you have to be careful that you're playing with. And so do you find that you ever have to kind of explain this to people, or when they come to you, they've moved past that kind of thinking that it's an either or thing? It's either my faith or it's this other way of doing things.
Well, first of all, I believe that nobody does anything or pursues anything that will make them feel unsafe. And I believe that our belief systems and thoughts that we create are an endeavor to feel safe. So the people that come to me for bioenergetic work, or what I would call in a very, very mundane, pedantic way, spiritual healing, because that's what they call it, my healing spirit. They'll tell me, you've healed my spirit. And I say, no, I haven't healed it. we work together, and you bring me healing while we do it. No one, healing is always bilateral, right?
Right.
So they call it spiritual healing, and so for those people who can't embrace things like a bioenergetic model, ideas like a bioenergetic model, and the modalities that are used with it, that's okay, and they won't find their way to me.
Right.
So I put it out there that, the people that are open to that will find. Now, they do come in with doubt and curiosity about it. They just say, somehow I know this might be able to help me, but I don't know why. And then we talk about ideas about why it may help and why it actually may not help, because there's no guarantee in anything, even in modern science, and there's no guarantee. It's the idea of intent and willingness that is part of it as well, to be open.
Yeah, and that's it's I'm reminded of there was this is many years ago, a group out of not a group, this service out of Calgary city, not too far from here, that worked with adolescents that boasted at an incredibly high success rate, like in the 80s and 90s, like statistically, just like that's off the charts to do that. And how can they make a claim with streetwise, like kids that are streetwise and have been on the street and who are difficulty with have that kind of success? Well, when I found out that before these youths could be worked with, they had to agree to the program. So they weren't being forced, they weren't on that. So they were already open to it because they were accepting this. And it was like taking them off into the wilderness and doing things with them. And the answer was, if it got too hard, is like, sure, we'll take you home. No one's holding you here. But their entry form was they were open to doing something different. So half the work was done when it came to it, because no wonder they could boast such a high success rate, because they had basically, they pre-qualified the ones that weren't going to stick that long. And so it's just like, it's that old joke, how many psychiatrists does it take to change a light bulb? Only one, if the light bulb has to want to change. Like it's just right? It's so, I think a big part of it is willingness. And would you, even in my coaching practice or my executive coaching practice, or working with people, the times I've counseled people and whatnot, I would think that the biggest difference is they're open to the idea. They kind of like they may embrace that could be a different way of looking at, maybe there's another way that I'm not seeing. Would you say that contributes to a large part of being able to have people come see you, that they're open to another way?
Oh, absolutely. But here's the thing. We're open to new ideas every minute of the day we're awake. Every advertisement, on TV, every innovation in science, new medications, we're always open to ideas. So it seems to be the real stickler is the qualitative nature versus quantitative nature of spirit and of healing and of wellness in the spiritual model. So that just because it's these largely observational studies, in terms of looking at strong evidence base, which we could use in traditional medical models and give quantitative results, it doesn't exist. So because of its qualitative nature, openness tends to be a little more sketchy. People they're not quite sure. So then really they have to go by faith. And for that, that's ultimately personal. And then also too, urgency. I think that people get to a place where they've hit a wall and it's like, I got to try something else. I've got to try something new. And there's nothing wrong with that either, because our journeys are our journeys. So if it's me or another practitioner or, another guide, another spiritual guide, we're all just signposts along someone's journey. That's all. Yeah.
Tell us what you mean by that.
By what?
We're all just signposts on someone else's journey.
Oh, I just mean that I don't believe that any of us hold the answers for anybody else. I believe that we're all journeying home to the source of what created us. And for me, that's God. And that's a spiritual truth for me. It's I'm just going home. I'm here, as I wrote in the book, and I'm just here and many of us have heard this statement, that we're here in a, as we're spiritual beings in having an earthly experience. And there are many variations on that in depths, which I'm learning a lot about in A Course in Miracles, which I'm a student of now. So,
which we both, we're both Course in Miracles students for sure.
And I'm going a little more deeply into it through a different type of model. But even A Course in Miracles says there are thousands of models, and people find again more signposts and more ways to go. And that's all we're doing for each other. And in my book, I say that we're all divine, eternal beings. And if I can, look at every one of you, I can see on the screen, and take away your physical form and just see bright, balls of light. There we all are, and we all culminate to one light, and we shine our light for people to see their way, and to whatever it is they're searching for. If we're very, very privileged, very privileged to do so.
Thank you. So I would love for you to share your book and your path to your book and on that. So you published your book coming up to, it's almost a year now. It got published?
Yes, yeah. It got last November. I published my book called A Course in Forgiveness. And it arose from my clients asking me to write what I was telling them, because they were listening to me, but they didn't want to forget what I was saying. And no one's taking notes when we're having a spiritual conversation. Often, sometimes actually people did say, "Wait, I got to write that down." But it would sort of break the flow. But that's okay, because there's nothing wrong with that either. Like, everything is in, I believe, divine right order. So we need to stop, and they want to write down what I said. And I believe that it was just, it's God telling me these things. I'm just a vector. Nobody owns these ideas. Many of us, and I believe all of us, have the ability to move these spiritual messages through ourselves to others, as again, the signpost. So I was just doing that, and people asked me, please just write it. So I started to try to write it. And I tried for almost 3 years to try and write the book. And I couldn't find a method to do it. And I write about this in the intro of the book. And the book takes about an hour and a half to read. It's only 70 pages. It's like, it's a very small read. And then suddenly, I was at the keyboard, and I just sort of given up, and I was actually just going to stop and not bother trying to write the book. And then these meditations or reflections just flowed through me, and I just started writing, and I wrote them in 20 minutes. And excuse me, and my hands came off the keyboard, and I just knew it was done. It's just done.
So am I understanding correctly? You had no desire to be an author, to be published? That's not nothing.
No, it was the clients who asked me to do it. I never would have thought of writing this. No, right. I was busy. I was busy doing other things. No.
Right. I don't have time to do that. I am busy.
And they said they wanted to have it to think about. So what I'd said. So I imagine I was, saying many of these things over and over again, and innovated different terms to describe it long before I had any sort of formal training in ideas of forgiveness. So, and I don't really think we need formal training in ideas of forgiveness. I'm just enjoying learning more about it, because I believe we're hardwired with everything we know, and it comes through us whenever we're ready to open for it. So there's nobody that's my guru, and I don't want a guru, and I don't want to be anybody's guru. We are all equal. There is this oneness. We're all connected as the one, doing the journey together of love and oneness. And and if people have a guru, all the power to them. That's wonderful, if that helps you. But no, I believe it's accessible for everybody when they are ready and in their own way and their own time.
I really subscribe to the idea that the information is out there and it doesn't belong to me. And when I do my best work, like literally in moving people from, how I take people from here to there, it's like quite literally, I look back and go, okay, yes, I was the vessel, or I was the conduit, but it really wasn't me speaking. And I get better when I have that idea of, not taking ownership for something that's not necessarily mine. And that reminds me of Carl Jung with the collective consciousness.
Mhm.
And he spoke about the fact that, the ideas are out there, and if an idea comes to you, then it's not necessarily yours. And if you don't act on it and somebody else does act on it, it's not yours. They just happen to act on it before you on that, but it's this
Mhm.
collective idea on that. Do you see that the same way?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So this idea of egoic thoughts about, I'm the authority on something, or I'm the only one who could write this, or I'm the best, or I have the final word, I think is such a limited way to think, because I can imagine that exponentially, as our consciousness grows in this experience in life, there will be more and more that's built on, while still preserving the essence of truth, for whatever truth people receive. And I can't judge anybody else's truth. I just know what mine is. And yeah, so we all have access to it. And thank goodness, thank goodness. And I guess that ties back again to me for legalism, which can be very performance based, and very much about well, only special people have it all. I mean,
Right.
I don't ascribe to that. I know there are people that will guide us and people that will help us to grow. I trust in that. And they come to me when I believe in that, and they did. I have been looking since the 90s for A Course in Miracles. Never found the book, ever. And then lo and behold, my husband tells me he's joined a group in Edmonton in the Course in Miracles. I said, what? And it's great. And there it is. And it's so timely that it came after I wrote the book, because the Course in Miracles is entirely about forgiveness and the oneness of love and of God and all of us together. So, I mean, what a timely thing to have at any time in human existence, actually. It's always been timely, in terms of
It
strife,
certainly has.
chaos, right? We can say that anytime. So, yeah, so that's sort of how the book arose. Yeah, it was that way. And it took a lot of confidence and courage, excuse me, to publish it, because I thought, well, who the heck am I? But that's just my ego saying that.
Let's talk about the ego for a bit, because you've thrown the word out there, and there's the word ego. I think I'm trying to think of. Well, I think if you asked 5 people what the word ego means, you'll probably get 14 answers.
Mhm.
Like, it's kind of a bit of a moving target on that. So what do you mean by ego?
All right, that's it's a good thing you've asked me, because I'm going to probably throw out there another definition no one's ever heard, but actually will know inherently and innately know inside themselves that there's some truth to it. So, for me, ego is anything that any thought, or idea that makes me believe or encourages me to believe that I am separate from you. So whether that's an object, thing, theology, whatever, that is created in what in the book I call an ego consciousness. And there's an operative ego that I believe is, like Eckhart Tolle says, I don't know what he calls it in there other than ego, that we use every day to just schedule things and exist in this form as humans. So, and it's in its more advanced state within my mind, it's going to tell me I'm separate than you, which means I'm separate from God, because we are all in God. So, yeah, that's what ego is for me.
So that something that keeps us separate from other people.
Mhm.
It's a barrier that we put up. So
Mhm.
if I believe that only people that make a certain earning potential are worthy of my time, that's an egoic thought of the fact that everyone else isn't part of me and whatnot.
Exactly.
Yeah. Or would you say that ego thoughts are also when you see people as less than you, not because they have less earning potential, but they've had a hard life, so they're kind of, you know, they're you feel sorry for them. would seem to me another thing that is kind of egoic, that they're not equal to you and whatnot. So it's then whenever we put anyone down or separate ourselves from anyone else on that.
Yes, and please include the quote unquote criminal.
Yeah.
Please include Hitler. Please include anybody that we think that's not us. That's not me. I'm not connected to that. That can't be me, the murderer, the rapist, the whatever. That's harder to connect to. That's harder to say, I'm one with that.
Right.
Yes.
Right. And they have it, and they're as valid in the world and whatnot. Maybe we don't see it or whatnot, but I wouldn't be surprised if people take objection to this thought who might be watching this video in the future.
Well, of course. Yeah. But I am not talking about their ego form human manifestation and how they acted. That's what I'm talking about. Let's be very clear. I'm talking about their state as a divine eternal being, and that they forgot they were. And the premise of the book is that forgiveness is truly and beautifully experienced from the place of remembering we are divine eternal beings. So everybody is. That some of us have forgotten and then acted out behaviors within an ego consciousness that were harmful and horrible to others is indeed horrible. And I'm not saying there's any excuse for that. But at their essence, everybody is a divine eternal being. And that gave me hope. And I remember saying when I discovered this, that holy mackerel, if Hitler is loved and part of the oneness and the love of God, then I have a chance. And it was yes, it was a hierarchical kind of view, but it gave me such a sense of relief that, oh my God, God's love, or a higher power, or nature, whatever you want to call it, is so intense and so inclusive that nobody can screw up in their spiritual sense and recalling who they are. Nobody. So that gave me hope.
Because God's love is absolute.
Absolute, yeah, and no one is lost, and that meant that a family member of mine that had harmed others and that had made mistakes, they're going to be with me wherever I'm going to be one day. That gave me such encouragement and such hope. But yes, of course, in this world, in an ego-based model and in ego consciousness in a human form, that is, of course, repugnant to many people at that level, yes.
Yeah, it reminds me of the that saying, hate the sin, not the sinner type of idea, that we need to, we don't condone, accept the fact that somebody who's done something awful or atrocious, that it's not as if they get a free pass, but it's their, well, it's one of the sayings from A Course in Miracles, and I had no intention of making this Course in Miracles, but since we're talking about it, we're going to do it, is oh, jeepers. I just lost my train of thought with that. Oh, it's either an act of love or a call for love.
Yes.
So people are acting in a way so that, it's very, they're acting in a very loving way, or if they're acting in a very, what we see as repugnant, which is a judgment on top of that, then that's a call for love, that they want to have that. But the bottom line is us, for them to love them and to see past, and forgive their sins on that. And I would actually like to circle back for a second to, you had mentioned this earlier, but what would you say is what gets in the way of people truly going to a forgiving place, do you think?
They have to feel safe. It's always comes down to safety. It comes down to emotional safety. How do you forgive safely? So in my book, I have a section called Forgiving Safely. And there's 8 points. Would you like to hear them?
Absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely.
Forgiving never makes the harm done to us or others acceptable, explainable, or excusable unless we choose to deem it so. Boundaries are always okay. Recalling the divine in us does not mean that we must place ourselves or others at risk of harm in order to forgive. We need never have a direct encounter with perpetrators of harm. Forgiving is not time sensitive. We forgive when it is right for us and for us alone. When we forgive, we do not require any acknowledgement or cooperation from those who have harmed us. Forgiving may be done silently within us, with or without recognition of the support of a higher power of our understanding. Forgiving may be done as a choice to forgive, and then as an act of forgiving. Forgiveness is the way that you release yourself from pain and suffering. Forgiveness frees you, brings you back to your wholeness, and permits you to experience peace. So, unless people have a sense of how to forgive safely, I think it will be elusive. I think it will be an undone process. For some, awareness of a higher power can guide them that way, and they can find safety within the higher power to do that. But I think, learning about how to forgive safety is something we should be teaching each other from a very small age. I think children should, something not, I really don't like shoulds, but I would hope that we have conversations about forgiveness, and meaningful ones, with the backing behind it of forgiveness, with children from, when they're very small.
Something that I think we do, there's something I do, or I have done in the past, and I'm trying to be more mindful of, is this idea of modeling what I want my kids to do. And so, if we want, I think it's seen as a good characteristic trait if you're able to forgive. I think we see that as something positive in society, that, at some point on that. And I think we expect our kids to be forgiving also. Mm-hmm. However, are we modeling it? Right? And do you think forgiveness, here's a correlation, and this just came to me on that. Do you think there's a correlation between inability to forgive and more the fact that we see ourselves as individuals? We see as, because we live in the I, everything's about us, the iPhone, the iPad, everything is about that. We live in the world of pretty much, this is about me. And YouTube is another example about that type of stuff. As we go into this more, the individual apparently means more than everything else. I think there might be a correlation there between people going, well, you've harmed me, you've wronged me, you've done something to me, so I can't forgive you because you've done something to me on that. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I know the collectivist cultures versus individualist cultures have lower suicide rates. I point this out to say that there seems to be something about the sense of we that helps to dissipate and to manage suffering. And so I think that, yes, an inherently individualistic society, which if I had to say, the weight of energy and ego would be strong in ego. Whereas a collectivist, yes, there definitely ego would be pervasive, but perhaps there are other ways they're managing it in terms of a sense of connection. So yeah, and modern technology today is a paradox, because on the one hand, it focuses on the I, but on the other hand, we're networking and bringing people together in forums just like this, so that we aren't limited to perhaps legalistic models that require us to queue up and stand behind the next most learned person and the most, that person that has it all. We can now all have some fair access, perhaps, equity and diversity and inclusion and models that we see today, just in terms of workplaces and, communities, inclusiveness. So I think that all speaks to the we versus the I. So there is something to it. But here's another paradox. It is the I that is leading us to the we. So I hesitate to choose one over the other, and I know you're not. But you're right. It's an interesting idea to look at, to say, wow, they're interrelated, but ultimately, if they bring us to the one, which in a way is an I, but the big one, that is that we're all one, there is no separation. That was beautiful. That's just beautiful. And yeah.
Yeah, so it's this idea that we're more connected but more isolated, so that we have all these connections, right? And this tendency specifically with on social media and Facebook to compare ourselves to other people's lives, and then how, you know, I think there's a lot of posturing going on out there about how great we can't show the weak side, we can't show those other sides. We always have to do that posturing. So.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're coming up to the top of the hour, and what I generally do is I show a quick video on something I created. This one goes back to January 17th, 2016, and it's actually, what's the length of it? So it's 91 seconds long, so it won't be that long. I'm going to play this, and then what we're going to do is, you're still okay to hang on, Bobbi, for questions from the audience? Yeah. So we're going to play this. I'm going to actually go use the wash while it's being played, and like I said, it's 90 seconds. It's 90 seconds long, and then we're going to come back and talk some more about what you're going to be presenting on Friday, and then I suspect some people might have some questions.
All right.
Okay, so let me just do this. Okay, and do this.
Welcome back to Bare Bones Videos. I'm Luc Bouchard, and this is my co-host Phil, who's actually looking pretty dapper. Wow, Phil, you're not lying in wait, are you? Anyway, Phil, you have a quote for us today. It's from Eckhart Tolle. When you complain, you make yourself a victim. Leave the situation, change the situation, or accept it. All else is madness. Well, that's right to the point, isn't it? Phil, what do you have to say about Eckhart's words? I'm sick of people blaming everyone for their own bad choices and unhappiness. We're adults. Grow up and start taking some responsibility for your messed up life. Wow. Well, Phil, you and Eckhart are like kind of giving us the straight goods here. If you have a favorite quote, please send it to us, and if you do, Phil will send you a picture of he and I mucking about. I'm Luc Bouchard, and thank you for watching Bare Bone Videos. You take care.
So one of the reasons I show that is just to kind of make things a bit different. Those videos, the Bare Bones Video Productions, is actually how I got to Bare Bones Communications, because I rebranded from Bare Bones Freedom Seeker Coaching to Bare Bones Video Productions, and then to Bare Bones Communications. So it's a bit of a progression, and it's also, for those of you that are coming back, you're going to see how I go from doing it this way to something different, having a green screen behind me and things like that. So it's a bit of putting myself out there, but trying to be silly and keep things light here in this. So Bobbi, before we open it up to questions about forgiveness or what anyone in the audience may have on that, I'm wondering if you just talk about what we can expect on Friday from your presentation.
So in my presentation, I'm really going to just discuss about how we drain and fill energy in our lives and in our being to function and be empowered. And obviously forgiveness work, or forgiveness walk, as I say in my book, and processes of forgiveness are fillers. And so we're going to take a gentle and loving and forgiving self-assessment that is private and quiet. We'll go through a little exercise about that. Yeah, it'll be an interesting exploration about, how much of my energy in my life am I knowing or unknowingly draining by not addressing areas of forgiveness in my life.
Okay. So so we're going to be looking at some forgiveness and some exercises to go through forgiveness. And what would be an ideal outcome for you on Friday for people as they attend your presentation?
That the participants get a little bit of a sense of how empowerment is connected to how much energy they have left over from what they're managing to create, so they can create. So, you know, the title, the co-relationship between empowerment and forgiveness is an accurate relationship. So unfinished business, and then the present state we're in, and lack of awareness can be drains on our empowerment, and therefore our creativity, and realizing the possibilities that are existing around us all the time.
It would seem to me that, or let me ask you this question: do people describe your process of when you work with them on a one-to-one that they feel lighter when they're done? They feel less burdened?
I would say, you know, there's a certain duality to it, because we are obviously very dualistic in our thinking, right? We have our spirit side and our ego side. So both sides seem to have a voice when they finish their work with me. And the ego side says, you know, I don't get it. I'm pissed off, or maybe it's stupid or whatever. And then the spirit side just doesn't even, actually often is speechless there. You just see it. But yes, but a sense of lightness, a sense of room, and just like, I gotta go in, just take this in. And I always caution people after energy work, you gotta drink extra fluid, you've got to just be very gentle with yourself. I warn them before a session with me, caution them that if you go deep in terms of feeling safe and trusting in a spiritual process like that, you need to be gentle with yourself after. And yeah, and now I have to say that what we'll do Friday, there shouldn't be any need to do that at all, because we're going to remain within the mind in terms of the ego, and keep it very, very safe. And you know, I believe in creating emotional safety in the work I do. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. And yeah, it just seems to, I just think of the times when I've been harboring or carrying stuff, and just the emotional energy to maintain that. And when that's gone, I just know I can be a whole lot lighter when not, because I just don't have that angst or pissed offedness that I'm carrying on and whatnot. And yeah, so it can be, so it's really, so let's talk about the payoffs for doing forgiveness work. What do you see as some, besides the fact that you feel lighter, what else would it be?
Of people doing their forgiveness journey and process?
Yeah.
Oh, well, they're going to, well, first of all, they're going to grieve. One thing about doing forgiveness work is that you become aware of what hurts. And you can't heal what you don't feel. I love that statement. So as people do their forgiveness journey, but they're also walking hand in hand with a sense of a higher power, whether it's a group of people, whether it's a person, whether it's a, you know, something formless or nature, and they walk hand in hand with that. They'll grieve and go through that process, because, you know, in acknowledging the suffering we have, we're validated. And if we deny how we're suffering or what hurt us, then we remain unconscious. We remain disconnected, and that pain gets to keep its source in us, whatever it is, whether it's a physical illness, whether it's depression, whether it's chronic irritability, sleeplessness. It'll find a home. So by unearthing it and uncovering it, unwrapping it, we get to see it, and we get to feel our sorrow, we get to grieve. But this time, and each time, we ask a little bit more deeply, what can I do next? What's next? Where am I ready to go with this? And so yeah, it takes some courage, I've got to say. Yeah. But again, it's private and ultimately personal, as we reviewed in the safe practice of forgiving.
You know, it's interesting because you talk about people don't forgive because they don't feel safe, and then something you just said, about not the safety, but validation. And I think of the times when, you know, I was really quite upset and angry all I wanted was somebody to validate what I was going through, to acknowledge it, and not go, yeah, you're entitled to be pissed off. They, the last thing I want is someone to get mad on my behalf.
Right.
I actually, one of my sisters thinks that the best way she can support me is when I'm upset with something, getting mad, and it's just like, now I'm taking care of you. Now I have to take care of your angst and what happened to me being here, right? So that is, I don't need anyone getting mad. I just want to go, yeah, that sucks. That must be hard. Or I can't imagine how you're doing that. And that validation is what I think in some ways, really desperately looking for, so that, there's someone else going, yeah, I hear your truth. I hear how that is for you, and not condoning, not making it right, not making it wrong, but just saying, yeah, I can't take away your truth from you, and that's valid.
Yes, a good, safe other human being is also very, very useful as we go through our forgiveness work. And someone who does that, you're right, has empathy, but not sympathy. Yeah.
Well, it's also this idea of impunity. And where can we have impunity? And when first time I heard impunity, I had to look it up, and it's just like freedom from external freedom from judgment. When you have impunity, you're not being judged on that. And I think that there's times where we can't have impunity with certain people because they're too close to it. So maybe sometimes me going to talk to my girlfriend is not, if I'm upset with her, maybe I need to go talk to somebody else, just say, blah, this is what it is, right? And then actually come with what the real issue is, so that it's not going out sideways over here with a whole, bunch of, verbal upchuck on someone on that. Right.
Yeah, because forgiveness is accepting that what was,
Yeah.
what is, and not expecting it to be changed. That's a hard one for people. So having that other who helps to ground us in that it was what it was, or it is what it is, like, and again, that power of now, Eckhart's work is hugely connected to forgiveness journeys, because forgiveness brings us to the present moment eventually. I mean, the moment we open the pain and look at it, we grieve. We know it's real. That's present moment. That's right there. But ego would want to pull us back to say, well, no, but if, what if only, but this, and then we have to feel that sorrow and then move forward knowing it was what it was, or it is what it is, and then we're from there.
Yeah, and I think that's something I recently learned too, is the difference between, I think there's a misunderstanding that forgiveness is that you have to, it's okay if you forgive someone, and it's not that. And so the reframe is accepting what went on without having, not a lot of negative energy and a lot of, on that, and just all this, ugliness that comes with and whatnot. I think that sometimes for people often think that forgiveness is that they have to exact a price from someone to basically, so that they have to admit they're wrong, or they have to be, they have to pay for what they've done, their pound of flesh, or whatever you want to call it on that. And I think with that point of entry, how can you forgive if you think that someone owes you something, or that they've done something to you, so that we get to, I know that's one of the biggest tripping factors I have on looking at forgiveness, because they've done something to me, so therefore they are the ones that are wrong.
Right. So justice and revenge often walk hand in hand, don't they?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, and then again, that is another painful connection, right? It's not going to be useful, because you're just entering another piece of pain and suffering and adding that to your burden energetically. So, yeah,
Right.
so not going to be helpful.
So here's my magic wand. It's not really, it's a letter opener, but if I had a magic wand and I could wave it on that, what would you want the schools, our educational systems that has such an influence on our children? I'm not talking post-secondary. I'm talking, what if I could wave this, what would that look like for helping us embracing forgiveness more in our society?
Well, I believe forgiveness is an inherent model in wellness, because I don't believe we can be whole until we forgive.
Okay.
the title of the book is A Course in Forgiveness, Meditations that Release Suffering to Bring Peace and Wholeness, which is really holiness. That's what the word holy means. So for raising children, raising communities from children to support their wholeness, I would hope that schools create forgiveness policies and procedures that they do. As strange as that sounds, I mean, I'm an occupational health nurse, but I used to work in critical care and even in, I was a primary care health nurse. So that's prevention. So forgiveness is a huge part of prevention, because unreleased anger and resent goes on to create so much mental and physical harm. So if we can help young people, little children, to begin to learn to manage disappointment, to manage loss, to manage pain through forgiveness, and modeling that, then I believe we'll make a better world, a better society. Seems idealistic, but I don't think it's that much of a stretch. I think it's often is, go and say sorry, and then, yes, you have to keep it at the level they can understand. But, and I would think children have more access to the wholeness and the turnaround time than we as adults do, because we have more ego operating.
That's right.
So they get it. Then they can hug and kiss and forgive, and it's real to them. Whereas while we're hugging and kissing and forgiving, we got a whole other story going on in our head if we're not guided by the principles of safe forgiveness and a higher power of our understanding. So yeah, that's what I would see is that we start a whole new conversation about it. And I think that it ends up not being so much about you did this to me and what did you do to me, and years of wars, years of punishing, years of politics, years of craziness, the insanity.
Re-traumatize every
largely
time.
Based in the past.
Yeah.
Forgiveness brings us into the present moment, and that's all that's real. The past is gone. The future isn't here. There's nothing real except the present moment, this moment that you're feeling, breathing. And if we go into the present moment, like Eckhart Tolle says, and people long before him, of course, the Vedantins, the Alan Watts, God, everybody's been talking about the eternal now, the present moment for millennia. It's because they knew that's all that's real. And in the present moment, there is no issue. Forgiveness doesn't even have meaning, but we get closer to it when we forgive. We get closer to understanding that I'm right in this moment, and it's beautiful. It's yeah. Yeah.
Pardon me? No, sorry.
It can't escape the spiritual realm. It just can't. I mean, and I think for those who are not comfortable with the spiritual realm, using the energetic as a substitute is just fine too. I mean, geez, I most recently, not too long ago, read, what's someone say, the Higgs boson particle is the God particle. Yeah. So we're seeing overlaps in physics now into spirit, and it probably always was. Math was always a spiritual language, very likely. So it's like we're seeing these silos are falling apart, and we're seeing things coming together again to this singularity, to this oneness, again and again. So it's exciting. But you were going to say, look?
Well, it's something where I do see that there's a bit of a different focus is the restorative justice model. And the restorative justice model, I think, comes from, if I'm pretty sure, it comes from Australia, from the Indigenous people there. And a lot of in Canada, in the Indigenous communities use restorative justice because our justice system is not about justice. Our legal system is not about legal. It's about basically finding fault, and there's no healing that comes in somebody that's been convicted and then doing that. And the biggest difference between the restorative justice model and our current model is, in a true restorative model, the person faces whoever's done the wrong, they face the person or the community that they've done the wrong to, and it's that hard conversation about being able to say, this is what your actions have done to me, and on that, and having the person being able to hear present and go, accept the fact that yes, I did do that. And that's where the healing is. Whereas you could have somebody who has done something terrible to somebody else and never have to face that person, or maybe on their trial and whatnot. So our justice system is not about justice, it's about legality and processes. And I think that, once we can look at that more as to really how do we bring people back to wholeness, and on that, because when you put somebody in they're a victim of it, then it's really not then that somehow makes it, we have this division between accuser and the accused, the victim and the perpetrator type of thing. And that automatically sets up a posturing on that kind of stuff. Not to take away what the person has gone through with the terrible incident. I don't want to, hope that doesn't sound like I'm minimizing it, but I think we have a ways to go.
Right. And indeed, we are shifting it. I mean, I know that courts now have a period where the families can say to the perpetrator how this is, the harm you have done and how it's impacted our lives. So it's evolving, but as things take time.
Right. Okay, so we're about 40 minutes from being done. I'm not sure if we don't always go to the top of the hour. I do have a hard stop in 40 minutes, so and probably stop a bit sooner on that because I have another Zoom call that I cannot be late for. But for those of us that are still here, if you have any questions, now would be the time to ask Bobbi about some of the stuff that she presented. And I appreciate those who have your cameras on. It always makes it a bit easier for that. I know not everyone can do that due to circumstance, but are there questions? And just unmute and go ahead. Chris, you have a question?
Yeah, so I was wondering if you've ever seen how the forgiveness could be applied to business leaders and world leaders?
Well, indeed, in my book at the back, I say that my dream and what I would love to see is that people get proactive about dealing with workplace incivility, horizontal violence, and issues in the world with having national forgiveness days. I think that it's at the grassroots level that each person begins to talk about forgiveness that then bubbles over, or not necessarily up, because I'm not sure they're up or equal, so over into areas of politics and areas of policy. And again, that seems unfathomable, that how could we talk about forgiveness in a way that could create policy? And we can. People are creative enough and innovative enough to find ways to, I think, embed these ideas into policies. So policies are great that way. I mean, they're often the bane of existence for any employer, and it's certainly for employees. But I can see that happening at the government level for sure. I mean, dedicating, different things like even sports games or fundraisers or a forgiveness day for gallery. It's just concerts in the name of forgiveness. If we just continue the conversation of forgiveness along with the other important conversations that we're certainly having right now in the world, but if we just have them right along with it, I think people might begin to open up. So I think there's a place, Chris. I would agree. Yeah, it could happen. Be the change.
Horizontal violence, is that the word I heard you use?
Yeah. So workplace violence where co-worker to co-worker, incivility, abuse, mental, physical abuse in the workplace, a growing problem. Yeah. So I think it's, it could be very popular.
And so it's not necessarily, it can go both ways. It's just not one person being a bully to somebody else, or it's just whenever there's unfunctional work that's abusive.
Yeah, toxic workplaces, I've had the experience of experiencing horizontal violence. So I understand really at a deeper level what that was like. And so again, what's important is is identifying it, knowing it can exist, and then supporting the worker, the employee, to understand, how they can heal. That they can't change what happened. I couldn't change what happened to me. I can't change that person. I can't change what they thought they needed to do in that moment in time. But that's gone. It's history. Now, what am I doing with me right now? How am I going to have peace and wholeness right now? I got to release it. And how can I release it? It's got to be safe. And I have to have a support system. So how does that look for me? And but I have to come to that knowing myself. People telling me that I have to do that, never going to work. But giving me the ideas that it is possible and that this could be a way to do it is what I may not know. So that sort of information in a workplace, I think, could be very helpful as part of an employee assistance program, or whatever spiritual support an employee assistance program may have, and psychological support. It could be embraced by the corporate psychologist, or so I think I could see it happening.
Cool. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chris. Wondering if Suze or Gabriel or that infamous Zoom user might have a question. Looks like there you go, Suze.
There I am. I have a question. I came late. I don't know if Bobbi talked about this, but I wonder if sometimes people are not even aware that they need to forgive, that there is something that need to be forgiven. And they are affected by it. They know that something is going, but they don't associate it with a specific, a particular event where they need to forgive something.
Susan, I would agree that probably 99% of the, should I say, unhappiness, depression, illness, anything that's throwing us off balance is in some way connected to some form of unresolved forgiveness. Whether it's at a spiritual level, whether it's forgiving God for betraying me, not covering, like, why did this happen? Forgiving another for something, you're right. And people are often not aware. So I believe that our life process is who we meet, and everything that happens to us in our lives, we participated in creating that story. And that, not that I'm saying that everybody deserves what they get. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that at some level that even I can't explain, we participate in this journey home. And on this journey, there's a point at which we begin to make big leaps in starting to scratch our head and say, I might be part of the problem. There might be something I need to do. What is it? What is it? What is it? And then when we ask that question, something comes along and takes us to the next level. But it is in that shift in our awareness, in that allowing and that willingness, that free will to say, oh, help me. I think there's something, I don't know it. And it's okay you don't know it. But please help me see it. Help me. And then somehow that miracle happens. We see it and we start to say, oh yeah, we might watch a movie, we might read a book, we might hear a story, and it resonates with us. So I would agree, Susie, that absolutely people are mostly unaware. And that's that dominance of the ego versus the spirit in the mind. And that's not bad. We don't judge anyone for that. We just know that rebalancing is going to start to happen where they're choosing differently with time. It's a very good point you bring up.
Mm-hmm. I'm mindful of Debbie Ford. Are you familiar with Debbie Ford's work?
Is that the Ford Center?
No. She was. I think she died in like 2000 or something. So Debbie Ford's work was all about the shadow work, and basically looking at the shadow side of things on that. And one of the things that she is known well for is saying something along this: if we don't understand how our trauma has benefited us, we're always going to be held hostage by it. We're always going to be controlled by it. And so the example she uses is that someone saying to her, how exactly with my father perpetrating on me the way he did sexually, is that supposed to be something that there's an upside to that? There's a silver lining to that. There's something that a good takeaway from that. And she makes a very, very she illustrates it very well on how that is seen as something that keeps us stuck, because, and this is the language of victimization, you're a victim. Well, it's not your fault if you're a victim. And you're not, it's not, you know, it's not, you know, if somebody says you're a victim, then really I'm exempt from any participation in this at all. And I think that's a bit simplistic, but also takes us off the hook to be able to go, well, did I have any kind of part in this? No, I don't think anyone deserves to be mugged, but if you're walking through Central Park with $50 bills hanging out of your pocket, you might have to stop and go, was that a good choice? Was that a good choice on that? But there's this tendency to go, it's not my fault. And so I even know with myself, with, you know, just at 3.5, my mother leaves my father in northern Alberta, and then she has a mental breakdown where she's in the psych ward, and we all put into foster care, and so there's experience upon experience of being abandoned and being you know, expendable is what it is on that. And it was, you know, even when we went to foster care, I was in one foster home and my siblings were in another one, and it was a mess. And then a mother got us back and all that fine. But did I have a chip on my shoulder? Did I take things personally? Absolutely. But also, after I did the work with Debbie Ford, it was this idea of, I also came to a realization that I accomplished a lot because I wasn't waiting for anyone to do anything for me, because I realized if anything's going to happen, it happens to be me. So I got my pilot's license at 21. I've lived in the Arctic Circle. I've been all across Canada. I've been to, you know, I've traveled some, not a lot compared to others, but that being forged in the fire like that, to be, I have this memory of being in air cadet camp when I was 12 or 13, and there was a major thunderstorm and somebody needed to direct everyone, and I was the one that led everyone out of the building. That was potentially a problem on that, because I'd learned that I can't wait for anyone else. So that was a major shift in my thinking about the fact that yes, it was there, yes, it was traumatic, but it has served me well. And once I forgave those situations, then I'm less held hostage by the fact that I have that, and I have, you know, if I have my chip on my shoulder has been reduced greatly. I don't think it ever goes away, because we know under stress we fall back on old terms, old coping mechanisms. But yeah, so, you know, if we think we're a victim, then it's really not our fault. And sometimes we have to go, you know, it's like this other statement: if enough people tell you that you have a tail, maybe you should turn around and take a look.
Yeah. So our thoughts creating our reality. What are we thinking? What are our thoughts day to day? Do we look at people and attack them and judge them? Do we, which is really ultimately just that we're attacking ourselves? Or are we trying to see the divine, and trying to see that there's new possibilities, and that I'm guided and I'm safe and I'm protected, which is a huge leap for some people, because for many people, because largely vulnerability is sort of the state of the union right now. Everybody is feeling a collective vulnerability. So it's tough to feel right now, to lean into that other truth that actually I'm not alone. I'm not abandoned. I am in this infinite love that is so huge, it's indescribable. I'm in it and of it. So I'm never alone. I'm not abandoned. It's a hard one to grasp, but it's, for me, the truth. And then that shifts everything. And then from there, how do I see this world? So if my cup's full and I feel loved, I'm going to see a different world. But if my cup's empty and I don't feel loved, I'm going to project that out there on everybody. So yeah, our thoughts create our reality.
And it's either a call for love or an act of love.
Or an act of, yeah, an ask for love. No, I mean, yeah, a call for love or an act of love. Yeah. So, well,
what other questions that might people have? Nothing else is coming up, nothing in the chat. So Mary did ask for the name of your book. She's signed off, but I know she comes on a regular basis. So in the chat, you can see the name of the book is there, and it is A Course of Forgiveness. So I'm going to put it in there again, just in case. And
yeah, and there on the website, I tried to make much of it free. This is not a money maker for me. This is not what this is about. It's just doing what I believe Spirit asked me to do. So I'm even getting the meditations where I've recorded them up on YouTube. They should be up, but my excuse me, my web designer is saying that they're sort of, because nobody knows about them, they're way at the bottom of the list. But yeah, so people can. I've tried to make the book very affordable, but Amazon controls the price and they go crazy with pricing. But I've tried to make as much as the book free as possible. So yeah, it's accessible. It's all accessible. And the rule, the safe forgiving is there too. And how to have a forgiveness meeting, how to do forgiveness talks and have a meeting about it and have it safe. I put a template up for that as well, so that people can get together and talk about their forgiveness journeys. So anybody could be a facilitator for that. Again, back to Chris's question, that's where the conversation has got to happen. It's got to happen with us. And then raising that expectation and then raising it and raising it up. So, and like the 100 monkeys, right? You just keep going. It'll happen. Things shift. I believe it's already happening. I'm just joining, other people who are opening this conversation up. So.
For those of you that don't know the 100th model monkey, do you want to explain what it is, what that means?
My understanding it is that at a certain point, when a number of monkeys does something, that if it's 100, just to say a number, then monkeys all over the world start doing the same thing. An interesting phenomenon. I'm not sure if it's an urban myth, but it's a fun analogy to use. Yeah, but
yeah,
people sort of do it. Like when I think I had an idea about something, and then I think no one does, and I Google it, and it's happening all over the world.
Right.
Well, I'm hoping that's happening with forgiveness. I hope that I am not the last person to be doing this. I hope that it initiates and ignites all kinds of different forums about forgiveness and ideas, and it catches on. Yeah, and no ego of mine hooked up in this.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. The definition, what somebody had told me on the monkey is, the analogy is that you have a monkey eating fruit by a river, and some of the fruit drops into the river, and then it cleans it, and then it knows, and then it goes, oh, there's not all the grime on it. So then it starts doing that. Then another monkey sees it, another monkey sees it, and by the time the 100th monkey does it, then it's in part of it's entrenched in that. So it just it gets a tipping point over to a tipping point.
Yeah.
Yeah. So another thing that you had mentioned was vulnerability, and what do you think people think about vulnerability when it comes to? Do you think they see? I wonder if people see vulnerability as a weakness, not necessarily a strength. Do you have any thoughts on it?
Well, absolutely, it's a key component to empowerment, and we'll talk about that on Friday. That we can't be empowered unless we embrace our vulnerability. So, and then our vulnerability is that honesty about our sense of isolation and separateness from either others, higher power, whatever. So yeah, there's a huge, so the paradox is that vulnerability is indeed a strength in terms of existentially it is. So.
Yeah, and if I just think about if I'm, if I'm going to open my armor up and say, this is my warts and wrinkles, and this is my humanity, that comes with smacking me in the face on that. I think that takes a lot of strength to be able to say, yeah, this is how I messed up. This is how I continue to, and this is how I am a mess. I'm not using the F word on purpose, but it's that idea, the fact, and for someone to get vulnerable, I believe, in an authentic way of being able to really say where they're at, takes an incredible amount of strength. But it's seen as the opposite in our society, that vulnerability is a weakness and whatnot. And I think to be truly vulnerable, you have to come from a great strength place.
Right. Yeah. Very true.
Yes, Chris.
I think I'm going to say a little bit of something that I had mentioned on a different show. Excuse me. I farted my throat. Bad timing. so the thing's it's interesting is my mother of blessed memory had a pretty tough childhood. For some reason, she just had a pretty tough time with her parents growing up. And she ended up eventually was diagnosed with reproductive cancer. This reproductive cancer has run through my mother's family. And she ended up going to some kind of a shamanistic type of energy healer. And, kind of some of the stuff just came out about, just her, what she went through with, growing up with her parents. And I think it just went through forgiveness. And she really just said, okay, well, this is, they just said, this is about forgiveness in the end. And kind of related, but maybe in contrast, is that both my mother and father went through what's called it's like a primal scream therapy back in the 1970s.
Mhm.
So Bobbi looks like she knows exactly what I'm talking about.
I know
I was
Primal
a
Scream.
very,
Yeah.
so I was a very little kid, and you can understand I couldn't really understand what was going on with everything. And I found out later that it's like for some reason my parents ended up going back to my other grandparents and started yelling at them for whatever.
Oh.
After the whole thing. And so I think the primal, and I think it did help my mother, but it was for my father. I don't think he was very happy with the whole thing. And my father's sister, who would be an aunt, went through it as well. And she eventually became a Christian. And when her first husband started to actually get into some of this, some similar stuff, like Barbara Brennan type of stuff,
Mhm.
my Christian aunt's like, we gotta, we have to list the house for sale because this isn't gonna work.
Mhm.
So
Well,
this is kind of interesting. This is kind of interesting experience on my part, that some of this, I guess some of this therapy, sometimes it can go either way. I've seen,
Bioenergetic workers
if you're
would
not
say
careful.
it's going to go the way the client wants it to go. Ultimately, in bioenergetic therapies, like in any therapy or connection, you're going to be people that believe they're doing more than they're doing, and then the people that know that they're just a conduit. So, that has implications when one seeks and finds an energetic healer, is someone who has the reverence and the humility to know that I'm just guiding you in your own process. But, someone who's, putting their hands energetically over somebody and saying, you've got liver cancer, I don't see that as helpful. I don't think that's bioenergetic healing. It's just to stand in the space to support the person to get in touch with whatever comes up, if anything, and nothing may come up. And that's, another piece of it. So however that journey went for your family members, that is the journey it took. And only they know, and the mysteries of healing, they know what that's about. But yeah, looking at the outside, not in it, our egos would have all kinds of conclusions about it. But in that moment for them, spiritually, if they opened and connected, that's where they wanted to go. So yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? It's like actually hearing somebody else's dream. We don't quite get it. Yeah, but it's meaningful for them. So
Primal Scream therapy is. I have a great story about Primal Scream, and there was a rock band of the '80s called Tears for Fears.
I remember them.
And so the story that goes with Tears for Fears is that a therapist, a primal theme scream therapist, was working with one guy who couldn't afford because it's very expensive back then. Primal Scream was extreme. And what Primal Scream is that basically you work with a therapist and then you go into a room with a cage, and the therapist, I kid you not, this is true. A therapist gets in the cage and taunts you so that you'll and you have some sort of stick or something, and you beat the hell out of something. So you primal scream, get stuff out of there, and you release it and whatnot. Well, this therapist had a couple of clients and they couldn't afford the services, and both these clients were actually musicians, and he brought them together and said, hey, why don't you guys, maybe you can make some music and then afford your primal scream. And they formed a band called Tears for Fears. And if we think of the song Shout,
let it
shout, these are the things we can do without, right? And songs from the big chair, which that song in that album was songs from the therapist chair. You know, and everybody wants to rule the world is about the ego, trying to do stuff like that. Yeah. So Primal Scream definitely has it roots in our culture and on that. So thank you, Chris. That was an excellent input and observation. So yeah.
We're all seeking and we're all on the journey, aren't we? We find the most interesting things. Whatever works. Right?
Yeah, and however we internalize things to do things, that old saying that all the knowledge of Buddha can hand it to you on a platter, but unless you're ready to see it, you're not going to see it, right? So okay, well, I'm wondering if there's no last chance for any questions, because we've had a slow drop off, which I think is absolutely fine.
Yeah.
So last chance going once, twice. Okay, well, I think we're going to call it to an end. Friday, 1 o'clock Mountain Standard Time. Come and hear Bobbi's talk on forgiveness and empowerment and the co-relationship between the two. And Bobbi, thank you very much for taking time out of your day to be here with me today and talking.
I enjoyed everyone's company. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you, Chris.
And yeah, and so I'm just going to have it. And Bobbi, since we have a few minutes before my next call, I'm just going to get everyone to sign out of the room, or I'll boot you out if I have to. And like I say, you don't have to leave your house, but you can't stay in this room.